All right, today we are diving into a really stark warning that runs through the entire Bible. It's this idea of false teachers, or as the scripture memorably calls them, wolves in sheep's clothing. Let's get right into it.
So let me start with this pretty provocative question. What if the biggest threat to a flock isn't some predator you can see coming from a mile away? What if it's the one you can't see, the one that's already inside, disguised as one of your own? This is the absolute heart of the biblical warning we're going to unpack today.
And look, this is not just some minor theme or a single verse taken out of context. The picture of a wolf in sheep's clothing is this consistent, urgent warning sign that pops up all over Scripture. The whole idea is that these false teachers are going to look and sound and act like they belong, which of course is what makes them so incredibly dangerous.
To really feel the weight of this, you have to see just how widespread these warnings are. We're not talking about something isolated to one book or one author. No, this theme builds across the entire biblical narrative, starting with the Old Testament prophets and going all the way to the very last letters from the apostles.
You can totally see the pattern here. Way back in the Old Testament, you have prophets like Jeremiah and Ezekiel calling out these corrupt leaders, describing them as shepherds who are actually devouring the flock. Then Jesus himself picks up this exact language, warning directly about false prophets. And then after him, you've got the apostles, Paul, Peter, John, Jude, all of them urgently telling the new churches, hey, watch out for infiltrators. It's a constant, unbroken thread.
And this is the verse that just nails the whole concept down. Jesus' own words. It's not just that these teachers are wrong, it's that they are predatory. The sheep's clothing is the brilliant disguise, but the ravenous wolf is who they really are. It just perfectly captures the core of the deception.
Okay, so if these wolves are so dangerous, how do they operate? What do they actually do? Well, the Bible gives us a surprisingly clear and consistent strategy. You could almost call it a playbook for deception. So their tactics really break down into 4 key moves. First, they mess with the truth. They'll twist scripture or preach what the Apostle Paul called another gospel. Basically, a message that sounds good on the surface, but is totally different from the real thing. Second, they go after holiness, by making sin and sensuality seem okay, even spiritual. Third, they split the flock. They create factions and get people to follow them instead of Christ. And finally, they exploit people for personal gain. We're talking greed, power, profit, the whole shebang. So the most crucial thing to get is that their methods are hidden. They use spiritual-sounding language. They might even do things that look like miracles, but the motivation underneath it all is destructive. The disguise is the key to their success, but their goal is always, always to devour.
This brings up a really fascinating and kind of complex question. Do these false teachers actually know they're wolves? Are they all deliberately malicious, or could some of them be genuinely mistaken, sincerely believing they're doing God's work?
Well, Scripture actually shows us 2 kinds of threats. On the one hand, you've got the conscious wolf. Passages like 2 Peter 2 talk about people who are knowingly in it for the money, deliberately exploiting others. They are stone-cold deceivers. But then you have the self-deceived teacher. 2 Timothy chapter 3 talks about imposters who are deceiving and being deceived. They are sincerely wrong, but, as we're about to see, both are equally dangerous.
Man, this quote from Matthew is just chilling, because it's the voice of the self-deceived. You can hear their genuine shock at the final judgment. They're pointing to everything they did, prophecies, miracles, fully believing they were on the right team. They were powerful, they were influential, and they were completely and utterly wrong.
And here's the real kicker. Whether a teacher is a conscious wolf or a sincerely deceived guide, the end result is exactly the same. The flock gets hurt. Sincerity doesn't make poison safe to drink, right? In the same way, it doesn't make false teaching any less dangerous.
So, you might be thinking, okay, is this all just ancient history? Were these warnings just for back then, or were they meant for us right here, right now? Well, the biblical writers were incredibly clear on this point.
First off, just think about the sheer volume. When you actually sit down and count the major, distinct warnings all across the Bible, Old Testament, Gospels, the letters, you get over 30 significant passages. The Bible doesn't repeat itself that often unless it's screaming something absolutely critical. This is a major, recurring theme, not some little footnote.
But here's what's really crucial. So many of these warnings are pointing to the future. Paul tells the Ephesian elders that wolves will come after my departure. Peter says there will be false teachers among you. And you see Paul, John, and Jude all pointing to the later times, or the last days.
This wasn't just about their own time, it was a direct heads-up for the entire future of the church.
So the takeaway here is pretty undeniable. The New Testament writers fully expected this whole problem of false teaching not just to stick around, but to actually get worse as time went on. That makes this warning directly for every single generation of believers, and that includes us.
So what's the defense against these wolves? The Bible gives us a really clear three-part strategy. First, you've got to know the shepherd's voice. That means knowing the truth so well that a counterfeit just sounds wrong, it's out of tune. Second, test every single thing you hear against the standard of Scripture. Don't just take someone's word for it. And third, guard your own heart, because deception loves to appeal to our own hidden desires.
And this is the ultimate contrast, isn't it? While the wolf comes to steal, kill, and destroy, the good shepherd lays down his own life for the sheep. The best protection against the wolf is simply staying close to the shepherd.
So this brings us to the final, really practical question we should all be asking ourselves. With everything we've just looked at, the tactics, the disguises, the motivations, how do we take this wisdom and actually spot the wolves in our own time?
In a world that is just so full of noise, with countless voices all fighting for our attention, the most vital skill we can have is learning to pick out that one true voice of the shepherd. It's the only one that truly leads to safety and to life.